welcome to Jeff.
Megan, how do I turn this on?
Oh, just that will switch all the way. Yep. Invisible, which is Jeffrey Mack's solo show. We're really glad that you could make it, and we're really glad to have Jeff and his work here. Jeff's been showing at MoonRise since 2021, and we're just always really interested and I'm curious to see what he's been up to. He's a great artist. He's curious. He's thoughtful and super motivated. So I'll just let Jeff tell you a little bit more about his show.
Hi everybody, thanks for coming. Before I get started, I'd really like to thank MoonRise Gallery. It's been wonderful working with Barbie and Megan, and the support to get this put together has been awesome. So thank you very much. So Invisible, I brought two bodies of work that both relate to that title today. One is blue and one is not. We'll talk about the blue ones first. These are cyanotypes. Cyanotype is a very old photographic process. It involves hand coating, usually paper. A couple of these are canvas with a photosensitive material and exposing it to ultraviolet light. Anything that the ultraviolet can see turns blue. Everything that can't stays white. And you'll notice that there's lots of syringes and insulin bottles on these. I was diagnosed with diabetes in 1976 and have been living with it ever since. And that's where the invisible comes from. Diabetes is not a disease that's terribly obvious unless you have some pretty serious health complications. Unless you happen to notice that I'm wearing a diabetes bracelet, most people don't notice that I am. As an invisible disease, I thought it'd be neat to take some of the waste material from treating me and make art out of it. And about 6 years ago, I started using an insulin pump. I'd been doing manually injected insulin before that. And these didn't get to stick me. They stick a little cartridge and fill it with insulin that goes into the insulin pump. And I've saved them since I started using that kind of therapy. Every one of those syringes is about 3 days. So I started and I did one cyanotype with just a single syringe, and then after 9 days I did 3 and expanded. And now I've gotten to the point where I can no longer expose the collection that I have, so I get to do complicated things with the space I can expose. And it's been a lot of fun to kind of communicate the scale of treating a disease that most people don't know that I have. So that's the blue stuff. And then the other invisible are these black and white photos. There's a couple oddballs in here that I shot in color, but most of these are infrared light. So another thing that is invisible to our eyes anyway. All of these are, for people that are technical, 720 nanometer cut filtered digital infrared photographs. I really love the white pop that it gives to vegetation. And how I started doing this, about 15 years ago, I was a couch potato. And I decided, you know what? My doctor's been hounding me, I need to get up, I need to move around. So I decided to start hiking with one of my cameras. Loved it. And one day while I was hiking around, I started to have a really low blood sugar. And right as I hit a clearing, I was like, okay, I need to stop. I always carry juice with me when I'm hiking to correct that. And I stopped, and it just was like the most beautiful place to ever stop in the forest. It was just gorgeous. So I drank my juice, I grabbed my camera, and I snapped a picture. Went home, looked at the picture, and it was technically well executed, but it just didn't have that emotion of awesomeness of being in that clearing. Fast forward a few years, and I got to work for a local camera company that happened to have an infrared camera. And one time, just on a lark, I took it out with me and snapped a picture. Similar setting, a nice clearing. Went home, looked at it, and went, that's it. That's the look that kind of brings me back. They've got that neat pop, they're very contrasty, and it makes me feel the way, looking at those, that I did when I took the picture in the first place. Fell in love, ended up converting a camera, and we like to travel. This is the tall grass prairie north of town. That's Les Hills. The famous bridges of Madison County, another Les Hills. North shore of Lake Superior, and some stuff from Colorado, and all of those were hiking and being healthy and getting out and experiencing nature and taking invisible pictures. So that's the two sets of material that I brought with me, and if you have any questions, please talk to me. I'll be here until 8:30, and hope you enjoyed the show.
I have a question.
Sure.
So
obviously, as you became an adult and you became interested in photography, that like led to your art. But what was it like before you found your art?
With diabetes specifically? I was really lucky that I got it when I was 4, because I don't have any conscious memories of not being a diabetic, so it was very natural to me. I knew people that got it later in life, some people that got it in their teens, and I think that's much harder because you're kind of established and you're taking care of yourself and you have to change the way you eat and the way you deal with it, so I think it's harder the later you get it. But obviously you start the clock on complications when you get the disease, so maybe it's not good that I got it early, but as far as lifestyle went, I've never known anything else, so it's been very natural to me.
And so what was like the precipice between using this as your art? Like what drove you to make this part of your art?
I've wanted to talk about it for a long time, and when I got the insulin pump, a friend of mine named Bart Vargas, who you may know if you follow Omaha art, was doing a lot with recycled materials, and that was kind of an inspiration point. And I was like, no, I just don't want to throw all of this away. And since I do photography, and there's a lot of it that you can't really keep safely because the things that do stick to me need to be disposed of properly. So it was the one piece that I could keep safely and make things out of. I played with using the cartridges, but they're not transparent, so you don't get it. They're not very interesting to look at. But these, I thought the kind of ghost-like images of them looked neat, and just kind of was organic. And I started with really linear stuff, like this one with nice straight lines, and this one with nice straight lines. And then one time I just scattered them on the table, and I went, oh, that kind of looks like DNA, like not real DNA, but like how I imagine DNA works. And then I started playing with the curved forms, and the wrist and the dollar sign just kind of came to me. So
The dollar sign just because it's so, I mean, it's kind of dangerous to be a diabetic right now.
it's gotten better. California kind of led the charge, and I know in Medicare or Medicaid now they can't charge more than $50, but off prescription, 3 syringes worth of insulin off prescription is like $300 off insurance.
And
so,
that's 9 days?
Yeah.
Wow.
So yeah, if I didn't have insurance, I would be very broke very fast.
So was that intentional with the dollar sign?
Yeah.
Or was that,
I
oh, okay.
was
like,
talking to the director.
I thought you were saying it just ended up a dollar sign, and I was like, that's crazy, but now I get it.
Yeah.
So that makes sense.
Almost every year I hit my out-of-pocket maximum. So the end of the year I don't have to pay anything for prescriptions, which is a nice break, but it costs a lot to get there.
But is that more new? Like, it wasn't like that when you were...
I don't know if, I've never hit it until the last few years, so out-of-pocket maximums must have become more reasonable recently. The first time I did it, I was like, I didn't know that I hit it, and I went into to pick up a prescription, and they said, you don't know anything. I went, huh? How's that possible? You hit your out-of-pocket maximum. Well, that's fantastic.
Fantastic, but not fantastic.
Yeah. It costs a lot to get to fantastic.
Right.
It's the free thing you can get after the expensive stuff. Any other?
I'm curious about these 2 little cute swirly side pieces.
So they
these
are not
very
diabetes.
Different.
Yes.
They are not diabetes. That was a side project. I also do a lot of other photography. Those are macro photos of the interference patterns on thin films of soap.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. This one is mirrored. I kind of cut it down an edge and flipped it, so you kind of see little faces and alien bodies and things. And that one's just the straight color play along the film.
Okay.
That's what happens when you let geeky photographers loose in their basement on board Saturday night.
But it's so fluid and beautiful.
Yeah.
There's not- I mean, you say geeky, and I'm like, well, I like you, but
It's wonderful.
stunning.
It was when that actually worked. I was really happy because put out one, that might be interesting, and then look through the lens and go, oh, it's really interesting.
That's
Have you
really
had
good point,
experience?
Elizabeth, because everything else is so structured.
Yeah.
And that's very fluid.
There's a lot of other photographs he's taken that aren't necessarily represented in the 2 things shared in the show, that it'll be like, oh, there's a rest pattern, I want to take a picture of this. Or what happens if I take the picture of a sensor of a camera, or...
Someday I'm going to get run over by a semi taking a picture of something interesting laying on the ground. It's like, I get a little single-minded.
No, that's never. Sorry.
Any other
Well,
questions?
I have
I
a
guess?
technical question. What do you have to do to a camera to make it pick up infrared? I've worked with remote sensing where,
Yep.
they've got a sensor that will do infrared?
So,
Some band.
modern cameras, when you buy them, they're sensitive to infrared and ultraviolet light, and they put 2 filters on the front to block those. So you have the whole filter stack removed from the sensor, and then you have a new one put on that blocks visible light and ultraviolet light. And you can tailor them. You can get ones that do ultraviolet light. It's really hard to find lenses that work well. It's hard to find lenses that work well with infrared light as well. There's a company, I think it's East Coast, that puts out a list of lenses that work.
So they don't
Okay,
focus,
okay.
it doesn't focus like.
And it creates an
much.
interesting thing called a hot spot. Like if you look at a light bulb in a dark room and look away and you get that little floating, it looks exactly like that. A lot of lenses, modern lenses aren't designed to capture infrared light, so they're not designed to not reflect infrared light internally. So it just ends up making a little dot in the middle. So kind of have to play. I've got some really old manual focus Canon glass that adapts well to modern cameras that doesn't have that problem because they actually did infrared photography back then. So those lenses were designed to take it.
Well, how does that compare to just black and white? We all grew up with that.
It's a great question, and you can actually still buy infrared film and shoot it as a black and white. Because of the different frequency range, like these kind of look like they're frosted. That's the middle of summer, and those are bright green leaves. So instead of getting like a gray that you would normally get in a black and white photo, you get that pop of white. And they come out of the camera actually looking very flat and very pink. There's a process in Photoshop where I convert it to black and white and add some contrast and micro contrast to get it to look like that. But if you buy infrared film, which is really hard to shoot, I've done it a couple of times. It's fun, but my success rate, usually 24 shots, I get 6 that I'm happy with. And it's kind of expensive, so I went to digital, but that looks a lot like the results that you get with film. I spend a lot of time trying to tailor it
Can
to
you
you.
shoot it when it's darker? Does infrared mean anything with lack of light?
So I've shot some on cloudy days, but it absolutely needs infrared at some level to work, and you lose, the second the clouds come in front of the sun, it gets very gray and very flat. And sometimes if there's like a column, like if you're in a forest and there's a column of light coming in, it can be a neat juxtaposition between the gray, and then you get this neat thing in the middle that's really well exposed and looks more like a black and white photo. But generally you need, like a high cloudy day, there's just not much to take pictures of. It does work with flashes though, and people look really, really, really weird in infrared light.
So
You
they,
don't- Go ahead.
you go ahead and finish your comment.
Like blemishes and stuff don't show up. Your skin looks very, very porcelainy, and unfortunately, it also shows any vascular stuff right below the surface. So we all look like vampires with little black lines.
Also, it washes out the color of your clothing as well.
Oh, yeah.
I was
Oh,
wearing a
good.
bright tie-dye t-shirt, and we took an infrared photo, and it just looked like a white t-shirt.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, it's infrared light only, so it doesn't care about color, which I didn't even think of when I took the picture. We were in Colorado, hiking around Mount Elbert, and I snapped a picture of her and looked at it and went, huh, oh well, your shirt is one color in infrared.
So they often talk about infrared as being heat, you know, like
Yep. So
do
there's
these
near infrared.
photographs reflect differences in temperature
So
at all?
that's far infrared. So the
Okay.
farther up the scale, you do start to get into heat information.
Oh,
This
okay.
is too close to visible to do that.
Okay.
Yeah, and those cameras, FLIR cameras, are very low resolution. I thought about that too. I thought that'd be really neat to take pictures of heat coming off of buildings and things like that. They're very expensive and very low resolution at this point. They do make some high res ones, but they cost more in my house. So
So that green really showed up really bright in your, so that explains that vegetation index where they look at the infrared red ratio to look at green.
Yep. And the film versions of infrared were developed for aerial surveillance because man-made things don't look white. So if you had like camouflage netting obscuring something, I guess military, it would look like camouflage netting and not like bright white. So it was originally developed for, the film versions were for aerial reconnaissance. There was a really famous photographer that did color infrared somewhere in a war in Africa, and it's all purples and blues, and it's the neatest stuff. They haven't made that film for 20 years. I've got one roll in my freezer, and I'm afraid to take it out and use it because it's so precious. But it's really neat, and that was what it was developed for. And then, as artists do, we take things that were designed for other things and bend them to our creative purposes. So
Well, it's lovely work.
thank you very much.
All of it's very lovely. I really find the blues that you took that ancient technique and worked with it. And I think about painters who go back and mix their own colors,
Absolutely.
and die of cancer or something.
It is. One of the chemicals is ferrocyanide salt, so it's safe as it is. Don't mix it with acid.
Yeah.
Once it's dry, it's not. You can't. The liquids themselves that you paint on are dangerous while they're liquids. All of the dangerous stuff disappears when the chemical. It's actually, if any painters in the room, Prussian blue. That same chemical process. Prussian blue is that same chemical reaction.
Is there anything else that you're playing around with using for photograms?
I've done them in the dark room, but I gave up on building one in our house because there's light leaks everywhere. So I haven't. There's some other alternative photography stuff or old photography stuff. Platinum printing would probably work really well with that. There's a chemical in there that is a rapid mutagen and carcinogen, and I'm not that brave. So I decided, you know what, cyanotype is good.
Right, well that's what I'm talking, like for the cyanotypes, right? You're doing photograms,
Right.
Right, so is there anything else you've been, like objects you've been playing with this way?
Not diabetes related, because everything else that I've tried blocks too much light. These are actually done, these are digital, the two oddballs are digital front ends, and I print onto a transparency.
Right.
And then use that,
That's awesome.
I create a digital negative, and then they're sandwiched together with a plate of glass and then exposed. But theoretically, anything that's clear, you could, when I was first learning it, I played with magnifying glasses and just about anything that I could find that would transmit light through it, and some stuff looks really neat, and sometimes you go, nope.
I bet quartz points would be cool.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
Yes. Sorry.
Was this just a light coating of the
I
chemical?
played with misting it on. It was fun. It made a really big mess, so I only did it once.
Okay.
Usually that's how I learn things.
I like the effect quite a lot.
It's neat. It kind of mutes it a little bit. Yeah. Thank you.
He doesn't have it here, but he's done somewhere he kind of striped it on or did patterns of the cyanotype, so you can kind of see the image, but you're kind of just seeing where he painted the cyanotype versus not.
Cool.
Sometimes you can have fun with brush strokes. Just depends on the effect that you're looking for.
Sounds cool.
I kind of settled on trying to stay a little bit more bold, but you can see the brush strokes on some of these at the edges. It's kind of fun. I left those as proof of how they were made.
Any other questions for Jack?
Well, if you do have questions and you don't want to say it in front of a room full of people, catch me. I'll be here for a while.
Well, I
and,
have to say, I'm much happier to hear that you're a diabetic and not a junkie.
I have a funny story.
Yes, we do.
We were out, my friend and I were out at a restaurant once, and I have a horrible sense of humor that sometimes gets ahead of my brain. And lady came up and said, "Oh, diabetic?" And I went, "No, heroin addict." And I went back to my conversation. She froze, and I was like, "No, really, I am not."
Back away. Get
Bad
away.
taste.
You weren't hurt. She was.
It was accidental. Well, thanks again for coming, and thanks to MoonRise Gallery.
Yeah, thank you, Jack. Everyone, yeah, and keep eating and chatting, and we'll be here till 8:30.